Hey guys, it's Justine here from I Should Read That, and today I'm going to do my July book haul, which only has 10 books in it! What a shock. So the reason that there are only 10 books in this book haul is because my YALC book haul went up separately, so I'll link that down below if you want to check it out. I did only get 10 books outside of YALC, which I think is spectacular. This is the smallest haul I think I've ever done in the 2 years almost that I have been posting on this channel. I'm pretty impressed with myself. I think that I deserve a little bit of a round of applause, thank you. I've actually read a couple of these books already. I've been trying to do better with working down my TBR. I'll do a video about that at some point, but I am actually gonna whip this TBR into shape. But I've read a fair few of these. I only bought 4 of these. 6 of them were sent to me by the publishers, and we have a whole range of loads of fantasy and loads of sci-fi. And 1 contemporary book, so let's get started. As per usual, I'm going to divide this into the books that I was sent by the publishers and the books that I bought. And usually the books that I've bought is the bigger kind of category, so I often save that for second. But I'm going to start with those today because I only have 4. I'm a little bit surprised with myself, I'm not gonna lie. First book that I can talk about is actually in my July wrap-up, so you can go ahead and check that out. I'll talk about it a lot more there rather than here. This is Sorcery of Florence by Margaret Rogerson. I read this month and I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, although it did kind of get close to 4.5. It's just good fun. And I enjoyed this so much more than I did Enchantment of Ravens. I got sucked in to the beautiful cover for Enchantment and didn't enjoy the book nearly as much as I thought I would, although it is a fae book, so I don't really know what I was expecting. But this, I loved this so much. This is a ridiculous, fun book that is filled with librarians with swords, there's sentient magical books, there's great libraries that are basically prisons for those books, there's sassy sorcerers, there is a demon who turns into a large fluffy white cat, which I'm hoping is a reference to Mogget and Sabriel. It's just so much fun. It made me think of The Princess Bride. It's like the perfect sick day book. I talk about this book and what it's actually about in my other videos, so I'm going to save you guys a little bit of time. You can check it out there. The next book that I have is Warrior of the Wild, and this is by Trisha Levenseller. I've not really heard anyone talk about this book, but I love the cover, and I love Daughter of the Pirate King, which is the first in her kind of piratey duology. I never really felt the need to read the second one, but maybe I should. And this is a kind of this feels like what I think I was thinking Sky in the Deep would be, although that's a book that I've not read. This is like Vikings with magic, whereas Sky in the Deep is Vikings with no magic. But it looks really fun. It follows a girl who is exiled from her village for not sort of passing, I think, the trials that she has to pass in order to become a full-fledged member of the village, and she has to kind of go out into the wild, and I believe she has to kill a god in order to sort of win back her honor and win back her place in the village. This sounds fun. It's super short. I really liked Daughter of the Pirate King and the kind of sassy romance that was in it. I really enjoyed the main female character, and I've got high hopes for this. Next book that I picked up is one that I've heard kind of mixed things about, but I'm really very curious. I really want to see what I think. This is Rosewater by Tade Thompson. This is actually on my Newts TBR. This is my E in herbology, I think. This is my 350 to 390 page book, and this is a 390 page book, so I just make that cutoff. But this looks like a really fascinating book. It's a science fiction book set in, I believe, in Nigeria. Yeah, in 2066. There's no description on the back. I don't know anything about this book other than that, and I'm really pumped for that because I am 100% here for a vague description. I often, if you're new here, I like to go into books knowing as little as possible. This is the perfect book for that. I have very high hopes for this. It just won one of the huge awards. I think it was the Arthur C. Clarke Award, maybe. It won this year, so it's getting lots and lots of praise. I have heard mixed things from other reviewers, but I really want to see what I think of this. Next, we have a book that I'm super pumped to read whenever I have the chance to read a 800-page science fiction book. This is Wanderers by Chuck Wendig. I am so excited to read this. Funny enough, I've only ever read one of his books before, and that was the first in his Star Wars trilogy. I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head, and I didn't like it, but I liked his writing. I don't like the Star Wars books. That's my horrible nerdy confession. Love Star Wars, hate the books. I think that they are mostly terrible, except for the Thrawn trilogy. But Wanderers, I'm super pumped for. This looks like it's kind of a post-apocalyptic book, sort of in the same vein as maybe The Stand by Stephen King, and it follows the survivors of, I think it's a flu, maybe? It's some kind of strange sleepwalking malady. It sounds great. I'm super pumped for this. I have heard from various people who have read it that they loved it. I've not seen any full reviews of it, so if you have one, let me know. I want to read this eventually, maybe after September, I don't know. And then I have the books that I was sent by publishers this month. So, most of these I requested, and one of them I actually won in a Twitter competition. So to start with that, I won a copy of The Black Hawks, and this is by David Raig. I think this comes out in October of this year. It looks very Kings of the Wild. I mean, even like, look at this cover. This is basically, they're marketing it to people who loved Kings of the Wild, which I did. It's one of my favorite books. So I don't know a huge amount about this. It has just kind of like some silliness on the back, but it looks like it follows a mercenary gang. It looks like it's going to be very silly and very funny. And I think it follows them trying to like lead, they're escorting a prince and a knight across the country for whatever reason. I think this is going to be great. I would really like to read this next month in September. I have very high hopes for this, but again, I don't know anyone who's reviewed it. I don't know anyone who's read it. It's kind of a mystery to me, but because it's got that Kings of the Wild vibe, I am very pumped. The Black Hawks comes out on the 3rd of October from Harper Voyager here in the UK. Next, I have one of my most highly anticipated books of the year. I'm so happy. I sent a very weird, very pleading, very dramatic email to the publicist who was kind enough to send me a copy. Thank you, Hotterscape. This is To Be Taught If Fortunate by Becky Chambers. Again, I talk about this in my July wrap-up. It is a standalone novella from Becky Chambers, who's one of my favorite authors, and it is completely separate from the Wayfarers books, which initially made me a little bit sad, but I know to trust Becky Chambers. I know she's gonna do great. This book is beautiful, it's perfect, I loved it, I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I just thought it was phenomenal. It was wonderful, and I can't wait for people to read it so I can talk about it. The next book that I received comes from Penguin, and I also have already read this, so I talk about this again in my previous video, my July wrap-up, but this is All the Bad Apples by Moira Fowley-Doyle. I love her books, and I loved this book. I knew I would. I think she's a phenomenal author, and I wish people would talk about her a little bit more. I discussed this book in that video, but it is a look at Ireland's history and how women have been treated in Ireland through the years. It goes into lots of dark stuff. There's some content warnings in my previous video, so go ahead and check that out if you're interested. I couldn't recommend this more highly. I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars. It's great. Next is a book from Titan Books, and I'm very excited for this, although I haven't read the series that ties in to this book. It is a completely standalone book, but it does take place in another kind of universe from this author. This is Turning Darkness into Light by Marie Brennan. She wrote the Memoirs of Lady Trent books, of which I have the first somewhere on my shelf. I believe it's called The Natural History of Dragons. Her books are meant to be wonderful. They're kind of like Victorian naturalists, but with dragons, which sounds awesome. It sounds totally like my cup of tea. I don't know why I haven't read it yet or read this yet, but really looking forward to these. I am not a huge dragony person. I don't really like dragons in books, but it sounds like these dragons are going to be the kind of dragons that I like, which are not Aragon dragons. They are Game of Thrones dragons, maybe, or maybe Temeraire, who's somewhere kind of in the middle, but I just am totally enchanted by this cover. I'm totally enchanted by the idea of this book, and I'm really looking forward to it. So if you've read her other stuff, let me know. I would love to know what you think. I believe this book is already out. I think it came out at the very end of July, and again, this is from Titan Books. Next is a book from Glance. This is Shadows of the Short Days, and this is by Alexander Dan Williamson. This is a Icelandic fantasy book, and I believe it's a debut novel as well. And this looks phenomenal, although I've heard it's quite dense, so it is a long, chunky book, and I'm hoping to read it soon, but I know I'm going to need to give myself a little bit of time. I know that this book incorporates graffiti art with magic. I read a little bit of the very beginning of it and it sounds wonderful. It takes place in Reykjavik and I know so little about this, but that's intentional. I really want to read this. My friend Judith, who has actually just started a booktube channel, so I'll link her channel down below and you can check her out, but she has read this book and she really enjoyed it. I think she gave it a really high rating, like 4 or 4.5 stars. So this is going to be great when I get the chance to read it. This might be a fall book. And last but not least, I have from Tor, Blood of an Exile, and this is by Brian Naslund. So, again, dragons, but I think that the dragons that I like, I think maybe the Aragon wiser than thou obnoxious dragons are kind of going out of fashion, which is great, because if dragons are gonna like be thinky and talky, I want them to be like Temeraire. Not like Aragon. Or whatever, what's the dragon's name in Aragon? I don't even remember, it's been so long. But anyway, Blood of an Exile takes place in a land that I think does not love dragons. And this man is sentenced to die because he's been caught assassinating or trying to assassinate anyway, a fellow noble. And he is sentenced to become a dragon slayer. And because he's really good at not dying, he basically becomes the most successful dragon slayer in history. Another one I don't know a huge amount about, but I think this is out now. This comes out on the 8th of August, so it is out by the time this video goes live. This looks really great. I'm really interested in this. This feels like much more of a kind of throwback to the fantasy that I used to read before I started blogging and got caught up in like new releases and new authors and stuff. This feels like a little bit of a throwback, and I think this is going to be phenomenal. I'm super excited for this. So again, this is from Tor Books. The shortest book haul I've ever done in my entire life. I have been filming for 15 minutes. Usually these are like 45 minutes of raw footage, so I am thrilled that I did not haul a ton of books this month. For me, I know 10 books is a lot for most normal people, but for me, this is super great. I could get used to this for sure. And I've already read some of these books and I'm just beyond thrilled about that. It has been a very good month. In the comments below, I would love to hear if you have read any of these books, if they are in your TBR, or if you picked up anything particularly interesting in the month of July. I post bookish content to this channel fairly frequently, so go ahead and hit subscribe, check back soon, and I will see you next time.